So Laura's knowledge of and interest in systems change, design, and human motivation form a lens through which to consider new ways of working together. After more than 15 years working in the federal public service, she's come to believe that working across boundaries, sectors, disciplines, and an unwavering commitment to supporting people through outcomes for everyone. In guiding individuals and teams, Laura shows an unwavering commitment to supporting people through change. When she's not reading, writing, reflecting, or sleeping, she can be found tweeting under the moniker @ResultsJunkie. So just in case you want to follow her, there you go, @ResultsJunkie. Mayor Lisa Helps believes that it is her job as Mayor of Victoria to employ business sensibilities and community values to lead an organization that serves all of its citizens. With a transparent and common sense approach to decision making, Mayor Helps has championed both citizen-led and local business-led initiatives in a variety of areas. She's passionate about building active transportation infrastructure and believes that such infrastructure is a key component of creating well-being and strong communities. David Hume is the Acting Assistant Deputy Minister for Government of Communications and Public Engagement with the province of BC. I like your short titles, guys. Yeah, they're really good. His impact team helps ministries across government think through and launch better ways to bring British Columbians into the process of improving policy and services that affect them. He has been full-time with the province of BC since May 2009, and before that has worked in various consulting and project roles with the UN, OECD, the province of New Brunswick, the federal government, and the government of New Zealand. So again, a very big welcome to our three presenters. Each of them are going to speak for about 10 minutes on the questions that should be coming up at any point in time. So the first person I'm going to invite up to speak is Laura.
Hello, bonjour, salamat pagi, habari, dome lara. Colleagues from Australia, Indonesia, Kenya, Botswana, South Africa, USA, and Canada. Thanks for the great conversations yesterday. That's why I'm here, to have great conversations and to learn. As Kim and Aaron's sign says yesterday, I believe that anything is possible with a little dialogue. Everyone knows what good conversations feel like, and my job in the Government of Canada is to try to codify that. So we do have principles and we have policies. Specifically, the communications policy says that we consider the views of Canadians when developing policies, programs, services, and initiatives. Amongst other things, we aim to have effective and open dialogue with an increasingly diverse Canadian public, or as I like to say, publics. We aim to demonstrate the following principles: transparencies, relevancy, inclusiveness, accountability, and adaptability. I acknowledge that these policies and principles are often aspirational. We often fall short. Electoral reform was one high-profile consultation that did not go as planned. Closer to home, a recent court decision about the pipeline also spoke to a good framework that fell short on implementation. Despite good intentions, limited time, resources, or capacities have sometimes created hurdles too great to overcome in that moment. Much of what we're doing now is uncharted territory. As we attempt to reconcile past wrongs into modern society, conversations will not always go smoothly. We won't agree right away on the outcomes, our values, or the process. That's why we must continue having difficult conversations. In theory, good engagement enhances trust so we can work together to co-create the society, neighborhood, or condo building that we want to live in. We heard a great example yesterday from Amanda Kaiser from the City of Calgary. First attempt failed, second attempt started with an acknowledgement and an apology. And then it was a huge success. Bravo, Amanda, for holding courageous conversations. I'm humbled by the amazing work I heard from you yesterday. As a fellow participant exclaimed after listening to our Kenyan colleagues, I'm humbled by your truly grassroots engagement. At the federal level, when the government apologizes, it's often for something horrific that happened before any of us are where we are now. Sorry for 150 years of systemic racism. Sorry that infused our laws and our structures and our institutions. Sorry the military fired you for being gay. Sorry you had to pretend to be someone you're not to work in the public service. Sorry you lived in fear. Sorry we didn't notice it sooner. Courageous conversations. There are many more to be had, and some of them have recently happened or are still happening. I want to give a shout out to my colleagues, Janique Venn, who works at the Department of Justice, for picking up an award here last night at IUP2, and her talented team for having conversations about the criminal justice system. And you can hear from another knowledgeable colleague of mine, Catherine Baviars, at 1 p.m. in Salon B on Canada's energy futures. Both Privy Council Office alumni, I might add. But I can't leave you with a magic formula to heal all hurts and right all wrongs. But I can tell you what I tell myself each morning. Be bold, make mistakes, learn from them, repeat. Be bold, make mistakes, learn from them, repeat.
So as you can now see on the screen, these are the questions that we have asked of our presenters, and this is what they will be speaking on for the first 10 minutes. And then we will be going into different questions, and then we will be coming back to you as our audience and inviting you to ask questions. But with that, please join me in welcoming Mayor Helps.
Good morning, everyone. Again, it's great to welcome you 2 days in a row. Thank you for coming back, and I hear that you had a wonderful evening last night. I'm going to answer these questions and then look forward to more questions from all of you. So I think we're all here because we believe that public participation is important, and you all know in the work that you do why it's important. From my point of view, it's important because if we move into initiatives or projects or build things or create policies without doing public participation and public engagement, they're not going to be as good. It doesn't matter if it's designing a new park or designing a trans inclusion policy or designing a small change on a street. Doesn't matter what we're designing, if we just do it within City Hall, in my case, or in your case, within your organizations, it's not just that we'll be doing it without people and that they might complain or not like it because we did it without them. It's actually that the decision that we're making, the policy we're creating, the park we're building, it actually won't be as good without doing public participation. And that's because, as you all know, working in the field, when we gather people together and ask for their input, we get a diversity of views. We get a range of opinions, and it's in considering those range of opinions that actually makes the project or policy better. So that's why it's important. It's not just a nice to do, it's a must do if we want to create good parks, good streets, good policies, good bureaucracies, and good communities. Within our organization at the city, there are many champions of public participation. And I have to say, one of the questions we're going to be asked are, who are the naysayers? And I think at the City of Victoria, there aren't really any naysayers in City Hall about the importance of public participation. So council, myself and council are very active in public participation activities. And again, as for the reasons stated earlier, we believe strongly that if we don't, and I'll tell you some failures in a minute, if we don't include and engage the community, we're not going to have good decisions. So council, all of us on council are certainly champions of public participation. A couple of years ago, at the beginning of this term of council, we renamed, rebranded, and repurposed our communications department into an engagement department. So it's kind of like an in-house consulting firm. We have an engagement department, and our head of engagement is here. He'll give a wave in case you want to talk to him afterwards. He's amazing, Mr. Bill Eisenhower. And so we repurposed our communications department as an engagement department, which, as I said, serves as an internal consultancy to all of the other departments. So instead of, or sometimes in addition to, we do like consultants as well, in addition to hiring external consultants, and Amelia has been one of them, we say parks will have a plan that they need to do for a new park, and they'll say, okay, we need some engagement staff to work with us on this 2-year project, and so then staff from engagement are assigned to, for example, the Topaz Park project or the Crystal Pool project or whatever it might be. Now there is a danger in this because it means that in our departments, they may rely too heavily on engagement staff to do all the engagement and they just do their departmental work. But the way that we've been working at the city, thanks to our city manager, who is also here and also amazing, insisting on interdepartmental collaboration and shared learning. So as our engagement staff are out there working with our other staff, the departmental staff are also learning new engagement techniques and new ways to work with the community. So in the City of Victoria, I think all of us across the board are champions of public engagement, and that is because, well, we think it's important, but also because our citizens demand it, and they should. So I'm going to talk now about what has gone well, and then I'll talk about some of our challenges. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the challenges because I think that those are some of the ways that we can really learn. Some of the things that have gone well in this past term of council, we've been making a lot of change, and we've been moving really quickly. And our citizens said, whoa, slow down. There's engagement activities every day. I don't know what's happening when. I don't know what to go to. I want to go to them all, but I can't balance all of that, so can you help us out? And the community suggested, and it was a brilliant suggestion, creating a public engagement roadmap. So in 2015 and 2016, we kind of went wild and just, moved really quickly. And then at the beginning of 2017, we had an engagement summit, and we asked the community, what should we engage you on? Here are all the things we're doing. What should we engage you on? Where on the spectrum do you want to be engaged on each particular topic? And then we mapped out for the year, okay, here's what's happening in the first quarter, here's what's inform, here's what's consult. And we literally created a very nice looking map that you could, at a page, glance. Okay, what's happening in 2017? And if you're really passionate about the bike lane on 4th Street that's going to be happening, the consultation is going to be happening, for example, in July, you might forego the Topaz Park engagement, which is happening in March, if you want to save your time for the later engagement. So we gave a really clear sense of what was going to happen when and what kind of consultation would be done on each topic. As a result of that initial engagement summit, we also realized that our public engagement framework was woefully out of date. And so in addition to creating the public engagement roadmap, we also, with the community, and it's really interesting if you read the strategy, and you can go to it if you look at our engagement page on Victoria's website, if you read the strategy, our new engagement framework, which was also adopted in 2017, you really do see community voices. We weren't anticipating having to do a new engagement framework, but it turned out the roadmap wasn't enough. And so that was a real success, learning that people wanted to know what was coming and when. But they also wanted a clearer framework about how the city would engage with them. The engagement summit was so successful in 2017 that we did it again in 2018 and did a similar roadmap for this year so that people have predictability. And now it's turned into an annual engagement summit. So at the beginning of each year, to align with our budget and our strategic plan, we'll also engage the community on how they want to be engaged for the year and lay out a clear path. And for any of you working in this field, it also helps all of us because it creates predictability and good planning for all of us. All right, examples of initiatives that did not go very well. And guess what? I'm not starting with the statue. I will talk about that, but for a different reason and at the very end, because it's a thought that I want to leave you with. I think generally when I reflect on what didn't go well, and there are 3 examples that I'll talk about, or maybe 2 because I'm getting close to 10 minutes. What doesn't go well is when we at City Hall look at initiatives or projects or policies from the point of view of City Hall. And it's very surprising to me because I come from a neighborhood background. I was a neighborhood activist, neighborhood developer before I became a councillor and then the mayor. And 7 years now at City Hall, I feel like I've lost that perspective a little bit. And I've learned what that feels like, and it doesn't feel very good. So that's the big lesson. When we look at initiatives only from the point of view of City Hall, we're always going to screw up. And so here's a couple of examples. We are building a new swimming pool. It's going to be awesome. Next time you come back, well, not next time you come back if you're going to be one of those people who comes to Victoria every year, but soon when you come back, you'll be able to come and swim in our new pool. And you may have heard how poorly our Johnson Street Bridge project went. It was very expensive, way over budget, bad project, etc. And so when we started out on our next big capital project, which was Crystal Pool, we were singularly focused on the pool. We wanted to make sure we got the budget perfect. We wanted to make sure that it was designed by the community. We wanted to make sure that we got our funding applications in. We didn't want any cost overruns, and so on and so on and so on. We were singularly focused on the pool. We did a great job of engagement on the pool. We had 2,000 or more people come and tell us how they wanted the pool to look, and the pool's been designed on the basis of what the community wants. So what's bad about that? The pool is in a park. And we didn't even ask anyone what they wanted with the park when the new pool is built. We completely focused only on the pool, and the pool is in a park. The park space takes up the majority of the site, and the pool is going to be located where some of the current playground equipment is. Isn't that a problem? People are going to miss their playground for 3 years while we're building a new pool. And again, no one's right or wrong. We're not bad because we were trying to bring in a good capital project after we'd just done a bad one. But we did not look at it from the perspective of the people who live on those streets. And so that, I guess I'll stop there because it's almost time to wrap up. There are 2 more examples that I could talk about what happens when we don't look at things from the point of view of citizens and only from the point of view of City Hall. I do want to just speak very briefly about the statute because I know that that's caused a lot of conversation across the country, which I think is a good thing. And the only regret that I have about the way the statute rolled out is that we didn't inform the public more along the way. And what I mean by that is you all know that when you're doing consultation, you have to do consultation with the people who are most deeply affected. And I think we worked with the local Indigenous people here for 1 year, deeply consulting about reconciliation, about what it means, about how to take meaningful action. So we did our consultation on that matter. We did it deeply, we did it intimately, and we made a decision. And there were a lot of people in the general public who didn't feel like they were consulted. And they weren't, because this was something that we needed to do with the Indigenous communities. But the mistake that we made is that the public also wasn't informed. And so I think it's really important as we go through the work that we need to do, all of us as Canadians, with our Indigenous communities. They are real stakeholders, and they deserve to be consulted on important issues. And when we're consulting just with them, it doesn't mean that we're not doing consultation. There's this kind of invisibilization of Indigenous communities if the larger public says we weren't consulted on really important issues with reconciliation. But at the same time, we must keep the larger public informed along the way. And so that's another lesson learned. When you're consulting with a particular stakeholder group on a particular issue, when you're deeply engaging, that's okay, it's necessary, particularly when we're talking about power imbalances or racism or those really hard things. It's okay to dive deeply with the most affected people, but we also have to remember to keep the public informed. With that, thank you very much, and I'll look forward to your questions.
Lisa. And as we said, we are hoping to get questions from the audience a little bit later, so please hang in there with us. And with that, I'd like to invite David up to the stage.
Oh, you guys are so nice. Thank you. Everybody okay? Time zones mostly adjusted for those of you that are from other places. I remember one time I went and I was lucky enough to be invited to a talk at the Library of Parliament at one of their sessions on New Democracy. And it was at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was like a breakfast thing. And so I had flown in the night before. And And I said, how are you guys doing? And they said, everybody's like, oh, we're great. And it's like, I'm not. I'm basically a farmer right now. Like, I'm getting up at 5 in the morning to come talk to you guys. So hopefully all of you who are here are doing great and enjoying yourself and are fully loaded with coffee. So just to mix it up a little bit, I'm going to push, I will say, let me put my bona fides on the table. I think public participation is really important. But I also say this, it's not as important as good teams who are doing really strong policy work. Because and really strong program development. Because in government and in doing the work that the public sector does, and in doing the work that we do with not-for-profits and Indigenous people, what actually matters most is the teamwork and the effectiveness of the people who are able to understand, to be able to listen, to be able to translate into options, and to be able to go and get decisions around the issues that are necessary, wherever you are on the spectrum of public participation. So I think when we do our work as practitioners, one of the things that I see working in the public sector is I often see consultants who come in who are incredibly strong in their frameworks. They're incredibly strong in their methodologies, and they are completely fish out of water when they come into the context into a political context, when they come into a context where they're assistant deputy ministers and there are other senior officials. And what they know is how to bring people together in conversations. And what they don't know is how to make policy change. And so I think that what we do in our work for public participation is incredibly important, but it is only one part of the overall policy cycle. What we do needs to be fed by data and research. What we do needs to be fed by the values that are led by our elected officials and the authority that they come in. I remember in the early days around this, we'll get to the naysayers part, but people would say to me, well, you're trying to undermine representative democracy with the work that you're trying to do. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm actually trying to extend it, I thought, right? But I didn't really know what that meant because I hadn't met that many elected officials. I came into government as a consultant and had the experience that I just described to you. And so where the maturation of this practice needs to go is to, I think in some respects, shed our attachments to methodologies and shed our attachments to principles and be more, not get rid of them, by the way, be more ready to understand that what we're doing is participating in the public policy process and facilitating it and making it better so we get good decisions like the mayor was talking about. Because that's where it gets to. I think that's what we do. We get stronger, more durable decisions. But you guys all know that stuff, right? I don't think that's the conversation I need to have to do. That's the work that we do every day, talking to the leadership that we're working with about the importance of this stuff. But I'm here to say it's not as important as all the other things. It's important that all these things are together. So, just want to make sure I got the question. So, championing P2. So yeah, that's a role that we play in our division. I work in government communications and public engagement. You can hear public engagement in our name. What we try to do is be a focal point for government and a service provider, kind of like what the mayor was talking about, to help guide ministries through that process of planning and doing. We have two aspects to the work that we do. We focus on kind of large-scale public consultations. This year we've been through, from last July when the new government came in, we've been through more than we had ever been in any time. I think we launched, and Tanya Twinstra, who's our director over there, I think we launched something like 37 or 38 projects in 42 weeks. And that was a staff of a team of 8+ contractors to be able to accomplish that. It was overwhelming, right? And there was incredible buy-in at the political level to be able to do that. Our challenge wasn't somebody said to me, Dave Biggs, who many of you I think you know, will say, well, are you guys just trying to do more with less? And it was like, no, it was kind of like trying to do more right now was the big challenge. But incredibly interesting stuff. And so there we go. We try and facilitate these things, and we try and so much of our work is about change management and bringing people through those things. The other aspect of our work is around what we call service design, or user experience design, design thinking, another way that we express public engagement, where we go and talk to people about the services that they need. Less dialogue oriented, more interview focused, from research focused, but the similar principles of bringing those needs, expectations of people into the process of policy and program improvement. Things that have gone well for us, I think have been ones where our team has been most engaged and most in strong partnership with the people who are doing the program and policy development. Because we're not in charge of that, right? Like our authority goes to the parts where, where we can look after websites and we can look after process design and we can and help to drive decisions. But, we're not the ones who are finally making policy recommendations. So the ones that go well are the ones that where we're working as a really strong team with our colleagues and administrators. And conversely, the ones that don't go well are the ones where we're not. Sometimes we encounter situations where time is so tight, or individuals and personalities are such that we're not working and we're not collaborating. Or maybe as we experienced this year, we were overwhelmed and couldn't do all the things that we would necessarily want to do. But we've had, I think, some really great successes this year. The affordable child care benefit, which was launched yesterday, I think we've got lots of work to do. This is a program, for those of you that don't know, is going to extend funds for parents, 60,000, 80,000 more parents in the province, to be able to help them get childcare in this province. It's really important. And we spend a ton of time in dialogue with parents and childcare providers to be able to make sure that program can be as strong as it can be, given all the time constraints and all the challenges that have gone along in launching it. We've also been out in the field talking to people about rental housing, which is, in British Columbia, is an incredibly divisive and challenged issue in all parts of the province. But because of the success of the team and the really thoughtful design that was created by them and the contractors that we worked with, we really had a positive dialogue, and we had leadership from the political level who was thoughtful and listening, a task force that was really excited about being with people and learning from them. And so that was, I think, a really great project. I think that there's so much more work to do. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I say little mantras to myself like Laura does, and I really want us to be one of the best in the world at what we do, and sometimes we are, and sometimes we're not. But I do believe that we're in a really powerful moment right now in our society where the trust in our institutions is eroding at a rate that really, really shocks and saddens me. I want to get in a fight about that. I play rugby. I grew up boxing and kickboxing and stuff like that, and I got a little bit of that in me. I don't think it's good enough. I think that we can do the role that we play in our profession is incredibly important in this moment right now, because it's going to be bit by bit that we create a better world, and it's only in the results that people get will they believe that they can trust their organizations. Even though, as we often talk with our team, there should always be healthy skepticism about what government is doing. So looking forward to the conversation with all of you. Thanks very much.
So thanks very much. We are going to go into another series of questions, and I'm going to ask each of you to respond to one of them. The first one you've heard us talk a little earlier about naysayers. And we all have our naysayers out there. Like, if you looked at the board in the front by registration, who cares? You don't listen to us anyway. Like, isn't it our job to do this? Like, why are we going out? From your internal staff as well. Why are we going out? We are the experts in this. We know what's best. Why would we possibly go out and talk to the public? They have no idea what we're doing. So my question to the three of you is, how do you have that conversation with naysayers? What do you talk about? How do you respond to them? Because you all three of you have said that you believe in good public participation and there's a role for the public. So how do you have that conversation? Who would like to go first?
I'm nearby. I think in our case, one of the questions I didn't answer up there was who champions public engagement, and I would say right now in this time and place, it's the Prime Minister of Canada. And in 2016, the Prime Minister published mandate letters for each of the ministers. This is not a new thing for the Prime Minister to send a letter to a minister telling them what their mandate should be over the 4 years. However, this was the first time that they had been published on the internet, and there was some very strong language in there about partnerships, collaboration, working openly and transparently. Not necessarily new themes, but it set a tone. So for me, the naysayers are often, I guess because I work mostly with the public service, that's who ends up being in that category. And so my job is to demonstrate the value, to invite them in, to allow them to experience it, to remind them that the Prime Minister said so, to remind them that our job as a public service is to support elected officials, and this is the direction that they want to go. So my job is to listen to people, what's preventing them from doing what they know is the right thing to do, and then enable them to do that well. So some examples, some very practical, tactical examples are workshops. So we designed and delivered a participatory workshop for people to have a bit of a tool that they could use in their own organization around context, relationships, and knowledge of the policy topics. So we create, they're not templates, but they're tools that people can use. We have a community of practice, and actually we have a community of practice that everyone here can join. If you look up GC CoLab public participation, just type that into Google and you should be able to get there, and you can talk to people directly who are managing public consultations in the Government of Canada. And finally, we tell stories, and we've partnered with Participedia to use their website, participedia.net, and start to document and publish case studies about what's been done in the last recent times and moving forward.
Thank you. As I said in my talk earlier, not too much naysaying at City Hall. Not to me, good point. Yeah, I know, right? Okay, fair enough. But I think that there is some resistance, and what Amelia said, there is some resistance sometimes from also seeing citizens as experts. We have expert staff, for sure we do, and they are expert planners and expert parks people and expert at what they do. But citizens are also experts. Citizens are experts in their own communities, and in fact, I would say that citizens probably know more about traffic flow on their street than does our engineering department. And so that, I think, is something that we're working hard at City Hall to flip, is to see citizens as experts alongside city staff with different kinds of expertise, but equally important. And so I wouldn't say that there's a naysaying culture in our staff department. There's certainly a willingness to go out into the community. I think the next step is to go out into the community as experts along with experts who also live in the community.
Yeah, I think that the culture of expertise is one of the really big challenges, and I think, and then there's also the other big challenge is the cultural risk aversion about what it means when you go out and meet people, right? And there's a couple of aspects to that. One is, oh man, I have to go meet people. Which is hard for people. Look, if you're really sympathetic, right? Engineers or policy analysts don't get into engineering or policy analysis because they like being with people. It's not what they're motivated by, right? They like solving problems, and they like making things, right? Most of them, if they had to choose between a thing and a person, they would choose a thing, right? And so part of what you need to be doing for people is recognizing where they're coming from. You need to be recognizing that there's fear there, right? There's fear that they're going to be, that their knowledge is going to be challenged. right? There's fear that they're going to be exposed and vulnerable, and I think the work is to be able to coach people through that. I say things to, like, you can talk to them as policy people. You can say, well, okay, so tell me what you know. Well, what about, and start to point out the gaps in the knowledge, and then start to relate that to what, as Lisa was saying, what the public can start to tell you about that. Or sometimes they're really dealing with incredibly complex issues, and the only way you're going to, where there are in fact no right answers, right? There are only values and principles. And so when you start to point out to people, it's like, well, I see what you're trying to do. I know you've got ideas and specifics and actions, and I know you got a lot of them, but what anchors that, right? What are the principles and what are the priorities that are going to underpin your steps in this? Because it's not a straight line, right? You're dealing with a complex or really complicated thing, not a simple thing. So I think the being empathetic with people is a really good start, right? Like I said, I'm not here to run. I don't think public participation folks should be running the show, right? Public participation folks are part of a team, and so if you demonstrate really good teamwork, that helps a lot.
I'm going to do a little bit of a two-parter here, because one of the things that we heard when Stephanie was speaking yesterday morning was the importance of relationships. And sometimes we get caught up with, we're so project-focused and decision-focused that sometimes we forget that people don't know who you are. They don't know what you do. You've just dropped in from somewhere. And they're going, okay, should I trust you? Like, who are you? So the importance of relationships and really helping the public understand what their role is in decision making. So what do they need to know? What do they need to understand? You come up and you say, I'd like your involvement in this particular project, and they're going, am I making the decision? Am I not making the decision? Is this coming as advice? So how do you help the public understand what their role is? Because I'm listening to all of you and you all care. But And also I heard about the lack of trust with government. So how do you help people understand what you do and who you are?
That was good. So actually, one of the things I didn't mention in what I was talking was that we do have an engagement handbook. We have two real core handbooks that demonstrate how we do our thing. One is called the System Engagement Handbook. You can find it. I think we have it online. Yeah, we do. The other one is the Service Design Playbook that shows you these two different core methodologies that we have in our group. One of the things, especially when we're doing public consultations, is and if Susanna Haas-Lyons is here, there she is. This is an idea she introduced to us a bunch of years ago, was the idea of writing a consultation mandate for the different processes. So it's kind of like writing a SMART goal for a project. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that as a model. I think it came from the EPA a while back. But what it does is it says whose decision, who is listening, what are they trying to learn, by when do they need to learn it, and what are they going to do, and so and who needs to be involved. And so we put that on websites, right? We just explain it. We try and, lots of times when we're working with our client ministries, they turn into incredibly long run-on sentences. So, you've got to trim it, right? To make it tighter. But I think it's which people like it, right? They start to understand what they're trying to do and what we're trying to do, and then they can get alongside us to help.
I think, as I said earlier, the public engagement roadmap really helped, and asking people, what level of consultation should be informed, should we consult, should we engage, should we collaborate, asking the public, and to be fair, making it clear that the public also doesn't have final say. It was interesting when we did the first summit, there were people who there was a lot on the collaborate side of the spectrum. And then when we talked about what that would mean and how much time it would take, it moved back a little bit. So I think that's part of helping the public understand what part of the decision that they are making is asking them what part of the decision do you want to make, and then outlining what the implications of that are. I think the other thing that we can do, particularly I guess as local governments, to build relationships, and this is something that I'd like to do in the next term, is to ask the public about what would you like us to engage you. Right, because we're like, okay, we've got a new park, we've got a new pool, we've got a new policy. We're always going from City Hall into the community saying, we are doing this, we need your input. And what I'd like to do is create a process for the community to come to us and say, we're doing this, we'd like you to engage us on it so you can learn more about it. And again, it's that complete flip. So some examples might be, we've got an affordable housing crisis across the province and here in the city. Citizens have brilliant ideas, and they're trying to work through some of these things on themselves, or by themselves. And so they might say to us, we'd like you, community talking to City Hall, we'd like you to engage us on our ideas to solve the housing crisis block by block in our neighborhoods. It's not our project, it's their project. And I think that's really how we can build relationships, is kind of flipping the lens a little bit.
You're really selling that pool. I really hope that. I really want to swim in this pool now. Maybe I'll just have to go in the ocean before that. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I'm from Nova Scotia. I can swim in the ocean. So when you were talking about consultation mandate, Dave, I was just thinking about an idea that my team had that we actually haven't implemented yet, and people can have this if it resonates. But we talked about using the principles, so when we were designing the principles and consulting on the principles, and we actually did a workshop in New Brunswick at GovConnect 2 years ago with a room similar to this, a bunch of professionals in the field who helped us develop the principles. We thought about using them as a pledge, and that they're actually a statement of commitments. This is how we will demonstrate transparency. This is how we will demonstrate relevancy, inclusiveness, accountability, adaptability. And actually, for each consultation process, talk about what timeliness is going to be. How long is it going to take to get to this decision? Because in my world, it's 2 to 3 years. It's not 2 to 3 months, it's not 2 to 3 weeks, it's not 2 to 3 days. And so how can we communicate to people what that overall process is going to look like, and better if we could situate it into what the democratic process looks like, because it actually is a little bit complex. But if people kind of know where they're situated in time and space, I think it would help them know better what to contribute. Because what doesn't work well is, and this is when we go in thinking that we know everything. When we go in and then don't listen deeply, when we go in and we rush and we push it through anyway, even though that's not what we heard in the consultation. Those are the things that don't really work well, and that's why we had this idea about committing every time to demonstrating those principles. And it really resonated with me yesterday. I know I already talked about Amanda in the city of Calgary, but plenaries, and then you can't, they're all divided up and you can only go to one. So that's one of the ones I went to, but basically what doesn't work is anything that fails to demonstrate trustworthiness.
So we're coming to the last question, and then we'll open it up. And I'm going to do it in 2 ways. I know, Mayor Helps, you had a couple of other lessons learned that you wanted to share, so I want to encourage you to do that. But we are well aware that we've got Australians, Indonesians, Americans, Canadians from right across the country. We've got South Africans, Kenyans, and others. So I've asked our panelists to think about, do you have any advice to give other governments wanting to understand and support good P2? So do you have any advice to give any other governments wanting to understand and support good P2, and any other lessons learned? And then we'll open it up.
I guess it's my turn to start. I think hopefully in my talk a few minutes ago and through the panel, we've all delivered some advice. So I guess the only thing I would say, in addition to what I've already said, is for everybody to read a book called The Book of Joy. It's a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and it's not about public participation or public engagement at all. But one of they outline, they spent a week together and somebody wrote a book about their conversation, and they outlined the eight pillars of joy, and the very first pillar of joy is to have a wider perspective. And so I guess that's the advice that I would give, especially when you're in situations where it feels hard to do that. It's extra important. And that kind of ability to have a wider perspective leads to more joyful engagement. So that's my advice. In terms of one more lesson learned, I think it's important, again, the theme of the lessons learned is to not always think from the perspective, in my case, from City Hall's perspective, or in your case, from the points of view of your organizations. We're in the process right now of doing neighborhood plans, and there's a neighborhood that's quite large. It's called Fairfield Gonzales, and the Fairfield neighborhood was saying to us for years, we want a new plan, we need a new neighborhood plan. And they were kind of third in line. They were fifth in line, so we moved them up to third and said, okay, we hear you loud and clear, you need a neighborhood plan. But as I said, it's a very large neighborhood, and so at the beginning of the process, Fairfield and Gonzales got divided into two sections, the Fairfield neighborhood and the Gonzales neighborhood. And the Fairfield folks had been very clear they wanted a new plan, that's why we were there. Gonzales neighborhood, we just kind of went along for almost 2 years now, and now they're like, we don't like this process, and you know what, we actually don't need a new plan. Our 2002 plan is working for us very well. And so the lesson learned is, if we had asked at the beginning, so do you need a new plan? No, we don't? Okay, excellent, great. Keep living in your wonderful neighborhood and we'll move on to the next neighborhood. It's quite simple, but sometimes missing those questions at the beginning really does not lead down a good road.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Okay, so I'm supposed to focus on the advice to other governments one?
Or other lessons learned.
Okay, well, wow, so you're gonna do this. This is not easy. But it's also really great and really fun. I think that the advice from the experience that I've had since 2009, when we like the first glimmer of the program for public engagement in BC started showing up, was the importance of demonstrating results, getting the good work, right, that does good stuff, is key. I think this kind of that sort of just kind of core change management ideas, and also taking that perspective. I can't really underestimate how much change management is actually involved in doing this public participation work. It's change for the public. It's change for people inside. You could toss as many methodologies as you want at people and making, boy, we use a lot of sticky notes at my office, okay? And there are a lot of, it is very difficult. I started making fun of my staff a little bit, because it's like, if I see another PowerPoint with people standing in front of sticky notes, or with tables, you know what I mean, smiling at each other, and it's all good, right? Of course it's good, but it starts to get a little old, right? If you've been in this business for a while. But communicating that emotion and communicating all those things, because these are real emotions and these are real people that are there. And so, there's those models out there. You may know the ADKAR one, which is all about awareness and desire and knowledge and ability. I can't remember the R, I think it's resources. But thinking about this as a change management exercise, and even selling it as a change management exercise, for public policy, for program improvement, has been, I think, one of the areas of value where we've really landed, and surprised ourselves with how much work we've had to put in to that particular aspect. It's funny though, actually, it's like one of the things I learned stepping into a more senior role in government, I was like, wow, and working with ministers and things like that, it's like, I had no idea how much adult education I will be doing in this job. Because I would sit next to somebody like Lisa and try to explain some terrible issue, and somebody like Lisa would be looking at me and say, I still don't understand what you're talking about. But that's all part of the process, right? It's about humans working together and learning how to manage change together, and I think that's going to be fundamental of whatever work you're doing in your government.
I was reading The Leaves before I came in, and one of them says, be human. And I was like, yes, these are my people. So lessons learned, I mean, I could go with some of the obvious, like don't eat yellow snow variety. Like don't plan an event 2 weeks from now and expect to have a full house. You're gonna do it anyway. Don't run a completely online consultation and expect to hear from all the voices of people who are affected or interested in this topic. Don't show up in a community without people who speak the language of the residents and think that it's going to be productive. And these sound really obvious, but I see these things happening all the time, and I think we've all been guilty of those things. So the real advice I think I have is consider the context of the people or person you're speaking to. And I'll just give a quick story. So before work a few months ago, I had this brilliant idea. As my colleague says, well, that's what makes you an executive. So I had this like, oh my God moment where I realized that I had forgotten to give a critical piece of information to a colleague, to a team member. And so, you know, I bang out an email and I fire it off, 7 a.m. And then I get into the office and she's a late riser, she's an introvert, she likes to really talk things through, think things through, take a long time to process things and put things into place that are thoughtful, not like me, likes to bang things out really quickly. So she arrives at 9:30 and she's pissed. And I'm looking at her like, what is going on here? And she's like, you totally invalidated all the work I did yesterday and the 3 days before that. I can't believe you sent this email at like 7 a.m. Why do I even bother coming in today? She was right. I had failed to consider her context.
So I will leave that with you.
I'm gonna hold it.
But I do want to give an opportunity to everyone out here to ask any questions of Mayor Helps, David, or Laura. So I don't think that I've got a mic out there. So I'd just like you to put up your hand. I'll recognize you. Please stand up. And I know that many of you have good loud voices, but this is your opportunity to ask. So I'm going to ask this lady just to stand up with a hand up and just a big loud voice, and then I'll turn it to the panel to respond.
I don't have a loud voice.
Oh, I can hear you just fine. We're good.
We'll repeat your question.
Yes.
Okay. I also work for a government, a regional government, and one of the things that we talked about a bit yesterday.
Can you see how many guys run town halls before?
So I also work for a regional government, and we're, on this journey of trying to do better P2. And one of the things that I'm finding really interesting is that we're trying to, use the IQ spectrum or something like it, and offer the public different levels of influence for the appropriate decision. I'm wondering how we can bring decision makers along on that journey and ensure that they're aware of how much influence we're recommending they offer the public, and that they're committed to it, because in our a lot of Canadian-style governments, there's a lot of process around being able to talk to decision makers in cabinets. So I'm just wondering what your advice would be as other public servants or as decision makers yourself, Lisa. What can we do about that?
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you guys to come up here and respond to those questions. David, you're already.
Yeah, I can keep going.
Give it to somebody else, and then you can come back on up.
Okay.
When you guys want to answer.
So just go on up, and you can respond.
Okay, yeah, tricky question. One tip is to try, that I've used again and again in talking to elected officials, is really trying to get clear from them what they want to get out of it. I think many of you who facilitate the processes of public participation will find yourself, you're actually in a strategic planning conversation with people about what they're trying to achieve with their policy or program. So the way I frame it is usually we need to try to understand one of two things, like what's the policy outcome that you're trying to achieve? Is there like a decision that you're trying to serve? What's the specifics of that? And then we can start to build around it that idea of like the consultation mandate that I was talking about earlier, about how that process is going to serve that policy outcome. But the second that I usually ask about is about a relationship outcome. because there's not always, lots of times there's some fragmented or challenging relationships. Sometimes the dynamic around the policy is actually really hard because, you know, there's some stakeholders or residents or citizens are more powerful than others, and so those need to be managed. And there's baggage. There may be things that have happened in the past that are a real challenge. When you start to elicit that from the elected officials, you start to get a better space, I found, to try and understand what you need to work with, and then you can go write it down and run it up in a decision, right? And then they can try and take the box, and then the thing that you wrote down starts to translate into that promise to the public that we all talk about. And that, I think that kind of works. There's lots of steps. There are lots of pieces involved in that. But if you're asking about the policy outcome, and you're asking about the relationship outcome, and then you try and bake that into the process and then go get it papered, that I found has really helped.
I would amplify two things that David brought up earlier. One, I think that P2 practitioners can learn more about the policy process to think about all the ways in which citizens can voice their concerns or feed into the decision-making process. And I'll give one example. We had the public safety, the minister's mandate letter said that he would consult the public to develop new legislation on national security. And the process took about 2 years, and I think it's just going into third reading in Parliament now. And so the folks like you, people who work in public service, their job was to support the minister from the get-go to start to hear the voices. What's the weather today? Is it raining? Is it raining over here and it's sunny over here? So it was very high level. Try to figure out who's out there, who has something to say about this, and start to bring them into the process. Now, 18 months later, or 12 months later, it gets tabled in Parliament, and there's a parliamentary committee reviewing the legislation clause by clause. And that's another opportunity for people to come in and voice their concerns, their approval, the impact that the legislation is going to have on them. So it didn't stop with the month or 6 months that the public servants were sort of shepherding through that the feedback process. It lasted all the way through Parliament and all the way through, letters to the minister, meetings that the minister had. So there were various roles that people were playing, and it's really important to understand as a public servant and as a practitioner what your role is and how you can add the best value and the pieces of information that you need to know and understand in order to put it into context. And the second thing I would offer is to bring in other data sources. Like David said earlier, it's not just the opinions of Canadians that matter. That is a very strong component. What also matters is, the 40% of Canadians believe blah, 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 blah. Well, is that actually true? What will happen? If we project this out 20 years from now, and we actually go in this direction, what impact is that going to have on people who live here?
So as you can imagine, Mayor Helps has to leave us. Lisa, is there anything you want to say to this group before you head out the door? We then will take a couple more questions, but then we will have to wrap it up. But I just want to give it to Mayor Helps for a minute.
All I want to say is thank you and keep going.
So we have time for 2 questions, and we've got many hands up, and I know, and so the other thing, just to let you know, is we'll do the 2 questions, but Laura and David have been with us and are going to stay with us for the majority of today, yes? So just get them in the hallway as well. So we'll have 1 question and then another question, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Thank you both very much. I'm sorry that Mayor Helps had to leave, but I have a question. Oh, I'm supposed to stand up. Hi. David, I don't know if you answered the 4th question in the initial one, which was how things had gone wrong for you guys. And I really appreciated the experience of the federal government and the city in relation to what had been challenging when engaging with the public. But my question is, as you probably guess, around digital identity and the way in which you ensure that you're receiving feedback from real and relevant people online in relation to the engagements that you do online. Thank you.
Very important question, and if I had the answer, I would not be here. I would be a millionaire for having developed an amazing solution to... No, that is a really good question, and there's a lot of work being done around like bots. How do you know? And there was a really good article in the paper about less than a year ago about the FCC, like a situation in the States, that I think resulted in a lot of great learnings. It's definitely top of mind. I think it's one of those problems that we have to keep trying to solve because I don't think anyone's cracked it yet.
Gordon, it's a really big question and it's a really important one. And I know you guys at PlaySpeak are working really hard on that. And one of the things that we haven't been able to do yet is really try and deal with that very well. Our challenge has been, like I was talking about, the amount of things that have been coming through makes it really hard to try and introduce those changes. One of the things about British Columbia, though, that's really interesting and special right now is that I carry in my wallet my driver's license, which is actually also has my health card number. This is also actually a digital identity. It's not very well known that because it hasn't been rolled out, but it's been designed in a very highly privacy enhancing way. If you really want to know the details of that, it's super complicated because privacy enhancing things, privacy by design things are really, really complicated and very technical. But what it affords us is the opportunity for people to come to a front counter, be verified, have their photo taken, and then be able to, in tandem with their mobile phones and other things, verify that they are who they say they are online. It's an infrastructure that's been in development in British Columbia for many years. It was the subject of a really important public engagement that we did probably 4 or 5 years ago, where we used a deliberative dialogue, a citizens panel, to be able to bring people together to talk about the privacy challenges associated with moving in this direction. And we learned a lot, but we also got a lot of support, which was surprised a lot of people, including ministers. So yeah, that's one of the things that's on the horizon. You know, I don't know when, but on the horizon is dealing with this issue, because I increasingly hear at senior executive levels, you know, well, they see the news, they see Russian interference in elections, they see all of these malicious actors. You know, they're hearing about the dark web, they're hearing about bots, they're hearing about all this stuff. And so when you roll in with your online consultation, it starts to, unless you're doing polling or something else that kind of goes along with it, you look pretty weak from an evidence perspective. So it is a really important component of what we need to do.
Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but I've got to close it now. So please join me in thanking our panelists.